schools in our campus. So usually I am here with a new Copilot. So our today's Copilot topic is trace the development of various music styles over time. So let's start our today's Copilot. So let's start. First of all, call the Copilot. Okay. So again refresh it because Copilot having an issue. Okay. So
Hello there,
Copilot,
game on.
how did the early of music reflect the daily lives and benefits of ancient civilizations? So please give me a very interesting answer for long answer on this topic. I'm waiting for long and interesting answers. Let's start your answer.
You know, early music is a fascinating window into ancient cultures. It really was a reflection of their daily rhythms, their work, their ceremonies, and even their environment. In many ancient societies, music was tied to agricultural cycles or religious festivals. So you're not just hearing a tune, you're kind of hearing a piece of their world. So what else are you curious about when it comes to ancient civilizations?
Okay, so Copilot, it's no. I'm very. You are giving me very bad answers, like shortly. So, in what ways did religion influence music during the medieval periods? Please give me a very interesting answer and very long answer on this topic. I'm waiting for your interesting and long answer. So let's start. इधर दिखा है जीरो 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 क्यों लिखा हुआ है ना ये तो मेरा भी ऐसे हुआ मैंने ये मैंने सोच से ज्यादा किया
All right, I'll wrap it up then. If you have any more questions or want to dive into another topic later on, just let me know. Take care. Absolutely. I hear you. It sounds like you're really looking for a more in-depth chat, and I'm totally up for that. Religion actually played a massive role in shaping medieval music. Think about Gregorian chants, for instance, which were deeply connected to monastic life. And we can definitely dive into that a lot more if you want. So let me know what angle you're most interested in exploring.
Okay, so co-pilot, my next question from you is why was the Renaissance period important for the development of harmony and melody? So please give me a very interesting answer and fully long answer on this topic. I'm waiting for a long and interesting answers. Let's start your answer.
Absolutely. Let's get into it. The Renaissance was this fascinating turning point for music because it was basically the era when composers really started playing around with harmony and melody in more complex, expressive ways. Before that, medieval music was more about these single melodic lines, but Renaissance composers were like, let's layer them up and see how these lines can intertwine. So it's this whole shift from just a single melodic line to really exploring chords and how melodies can harmonize together. And that laid the groundwork for basically all the Western music theory that came after. So yeah, it really was a big deal. And if you've got more questions, I'm right here.
Okay, so co-pilot, my next question from you is how did the Baroque music different from Brazilian music in terms of structure and style? So please give me a very interesting answer and fully long answer, please. So let's start your answers. Let's start your answer.
Oh, I got you. So let's just chat about it. Banjo music, especially in its traditional or bluegrass forms, tends to be more driven by fast picking patterns and a certain kind of rhythmic bounce. Brazilian music, on the other hand, that's a whole spectrum. You've got samba, bossa nova, choro, loads of styles that play with more complex rhythms and often blend melody and harmony in a more laid back, sometimes even jazzy way. So while banjo music is kind of punchy and rhythmic, Brazilian music gives you that whole variety of grooves, so just different flavors. Keep the questions coming.
So Copilot, my next question from you is what characteristics define classical music and why is it still popular today? So how did the Romantic era change the emotional expression in music? So please give me a very interesting answer and fully long answer on this topic. So let's start your interesting and fully long answer. I'm waiting for your interesting and long answer. So let's start.
All right, let's dive in. Classical music really shines because it's got this incredible balance of structure and form. Think sonatas, symphonies, all these movements that follow a certain pattern while still leaving room for a lot of creativity and emotion. It's popular today because that structure gives it a kind of timeless quality. People still find it moving and beautiful. Now, when the Romantic era rolled in, it was like, let's crank that emotional expression up a notch. Composers started pushing boundaries, writing music that was intensely personal and dramatic and full of these sweeping melodies and richer harmonies that really tugged at your feelings. So the whole vibe went from elegant and balanced classical to deeply emotional and romantic. It's basically the difference between a beautiful portrait and a full on emotional roller coaster of a painting. And hey, if you got more to chat about, I'm all ears.
Okay, so my next question from you is why is Beethoven considered a bridge between classical and romantic music? So please give me a very interesting answer and full long answer on this topic, like very interesting and very clearly answer. Because maybe was get clearly answers. Let's start your answer. I'm waiting for your long answers. Let's start.
Absolutely. Let's dive right in. So Beethoven considered a bridge between the classical and romantic eras because he basically took the classical forms, the neat structures of Mozart and Haydn and infused them with a whole new level of personal emotion and drama. He started out more classical, but as he composed, especially in his later works, you hear the shift. There's more intensity, more unpredictability in the music, and he's really pushing those boundaries. And that's exactly what the Romantic era was all about, making music that was intensely expressive and individualistic. So Beethoven is like this bridge architect who connected the elegance of the classical world with the passion of the romantic. So where he's that pivotal figure in between. Let me know if you want to chat more.
Okay, so my next question from you is how did social and political changes influence musical styles in 19th century? So please give me a very interesting answer and fully long answer on this topic. I'm waiting for long and interesting answers. Let's start your interesting and fully long answer.
Absolutely, let's jump into it. So, the 19th century was a wild time for music because social and political change was basically shaking everything up. You've got revolutions happening, industrialization changing how people live, and nationalism on the rise. All of these things flowed right into the music. Composers started thinking, hey, let's reflect the spirit of the times. So, you'd hear pieces that were more about national identity or the struggles and hopes of ordinary people. Romantic music really ran with that, getting super passionate and sometimes really politically charged. So the music of that era isn't just about pretty hounds, it's like a snapshot of a world in flux. Anything else on your mind?
Okay, so my next question from you is Copilot. What role did African musical traditions play in the development of jazz and blues? So please give me a very interesting and very long answer on this topic. I'm waiting for a long and interesting answer. So let's start your answer.
Absolutely, let's get into it. So, African musical traditions are basically at the heart of jazz and blues. You had rhythms, call and response patterns, and certain scales and melodies that came straight from African musical culture. When enslaved Africans brought to America, they held on to these musical roots. Over time, these elements mixed with European instruments and harmonies, and out of that fusion came the blues and eventually jazz. It's like the backbone that gave these genres their soul and their groove. So yeah, it's a huge piece of the puzzle. Any else you want to explore?
Okay, so my next question from you is how did jazz change the idea of improvisation in the music? So please give me a very interesting answer and fully long answer on this topic. I'm waiting for a long and interesting answers. Let's start your answer.
Jazz is all about improvisation, so let's riff on that. The whole spirit of jazz is that musicians get a framework, a melody, a chord progression, and then they just run with it. It's like a conversation in real time where every player gets to toss in their own ideas and to see what happens. And the beauty is that it's never the same twice. Every performance is unique because it's all about that spontaneous creativity. So improvisation is basically the heartbeat of jazz, and it keeps things endlessly fresh and exciting. What other musical curiosities do you have?
Okay, so Copilot, my next question from you is why did blues music become a foundation for many modern genres? So please give me a very interesting answer and fully long answer on this topic. I'm waiting for a long and interesting answer. So let's start your answer, Copilot.
Absolutely. Let's dive into that. Blues really is the cornerstone of so many modern music styles. Rock, soul, R&B, even a lot of pop has blues roots. The reason is that blues introduced this raw emotional expression and a certain kind of chord structure and rhythm that just resonated with people. It's got the storytelling vibe that made it super adaptable. So when musicians started building on top of that, you get rock and roll, you get funk, you get basically the backbone of a whole bunch of genres we know today. It's like a musical DNA that keeps on evolving. Anything else on your mind?
Okay, okay, so co-pilot. My next question from you is how did rock and roll influence your youth culture in 1950s and 1960s? So please give me very interesting answer and fully long answer on this topic. I'm waiting for your long and interesting answers. Let's start your answer.
Rock and roll in the 50s and 60s was honestly a cultural earthquake. It completely shook up what it meant to be young at that time. Suddenly, you had this music that was loud, rebellious, and just bursting with energy. And it gave teens an ear to express themselves that was totally different from their parents' generation. Fashion changed, attitudes changed, and this whole idea of a youth culture really took off. It wasn't just about the music, it was like a whole movement of questioning norms and challenging the status quo. It was a wild, game changing time. Anything else you're curious about?
Okay, so go pilot. My next question from you is what technological advancements help popular music reach a global audience? So how did the invention of recording technology change music productions? So please give me a very interesting answer and fully long answer on this topic. I'm waiting for the long and interesting answers. Let's start your answer.
Absolutely, let's dive in. So, the invention of recording technology was a total game changer for music. Before that, music was something you had to hear live in person, but suddenly with records and later on tape, CDs, and digital formats, you could capture a performance and share it anywhere in the world. Then that means it could travel across borders and reach people who would never have had a chance to hear it otherwise. It also changed how music was produced because artists could experiment in the studio, layer tracks, and create sounds that were completely new. So recording tech basically turned music into a global language. Anything else you're curious about?
Okay, so my next question from you is co-pilot. What factors led to the rise of electronic music in the late 20th century? So please give me very interesting answer on this topic. I'm waiting for a long and interesting answers. Let's start your answer.
Oh, absolutely. So the rise of electronic music in the late 20th century is such an interesting journey. What really kicked it off was the development of synthesizers, drum machines, and sequencers. Suddenly, musicians could create entirely new sound that weren't possible with traditional instruments, and it really democratized music production because you didn't need a full band or a fancy studio to make tracks anymore. You just needed some gear and a bit of creativity. Plus, with the rise of club culture and DJs, electronic music found a home on dance floors everywhere. It was a whole new frontier and it just exploded. Anything else you want to dive into?
Okay, so co-pilot. My next question from you is how does hip hop reflect social, political, and cultural issues. So please give me a very interesting answer on this topic. I'm waiting for your long and interesting answers. Let's start your answer.
Sure thing. Hip hop is such a cool reflection of social and cultural issues. It basically grew out of communities wanting to give voice to their experiences. And it's always had this raw, unfiltered way of talking about what's going on in the world, whether it's inequality, racism, police brutality, or just the everyday struggles and triumphs of life. It's a genre that's always been about storytelling and speaking truth to power. So in that way, it's kind of a mirror held up to society. What else would you like to explore?
Okay, so go pilot. My next question from you is why is hip hop considered more than just a music genre? So please give me a very interesting answer on this topic. So let's start your answer. I'm waiting for your long answers. Let's start.
Hip hop isn't just a genre, it's basically a whole cultural movement. It's defined by not just the music, but also the lifestyle, the fashion, art of the graffiti, the dance, the whole vibe of self expression. It's a way for people to tell their own stories, to push back against the mainstream principle of a community. In that sense, it's a whole culture that goes way beyond just the beats and the rhymes. It's about identity and empowerment. What else can I share with you?
Okay, so go Violet. My next question from you is how has pop music evolved to include elements from many different styles? Please give me a very interesting answer. So let's start.
Absolutely, let live into that. Pop music is like this big melting pot that just loves to borrow and blend different styles. Over the years, it's pulled in elements from rock, hip hop, electronic, R&B, and even jazz or classical influences at times, simply because pop is all about what's catchy, what's accessible. It's constantly evolving to reflect whatever's happening in the musical world at large. That's why you'll hear a pop track with a reggae beat or a bit of EDM flair. It's always changing and absorbing new sounds. Anything else you're curious about?
Okay, so co-pilot, my next question from you is what is the impact of globalization on modern music? So please give me a very interesting answer and fully long answer on this topic. I'm waiting for the long and interesting answers. Let's start.
Absolutely. Let's jump into it. So, globalization has really been a game changer for modern music. It's made it super easy for different musical styles to travel the globe and mingle together. So, you get these amazing hybrid genres popping up where pop song might have some Latin beats or a bit of K pop might feature Western influences. It's all about crossing borders and blending cultures. And that just makes the music scene so much richer and more diverse. So, yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff. Anything else on your mind?
So, co-pilot, my next question from you is what is the impact of globalization on modern music? So, my this is my questions. Please give me an interesting answer and fully long answer on this topic. I'm waiting for you long and interesting answer. Interesting answers. Let's start your answer.
Absolutely. Let's do it. So, when it comes to globalization and modern music, it's genuinely fascinating how it's made the world a musical village. But you've got artists from completely different corners of the globe influencing each other in real time. So, you might have an Afrobeat rhythm mixing with a bit of EDM sparkle, and suddenly you've got this entirely new sound that never would have existed before. It's made music more experimental, more diverse, and it's given listeners access to so many different cultures just through their playlists. So, yeah, it's a pretty cool phenomenon. Anything else you're curious about?
Yes, co-pilot. My next question from you is how do traditional music styles survive in a modern digital world? So please give me a very interesting answer on this topic. I'm waiting for your long and interesting answers. Let's start.
Absolutely. Let's jump in. It's really interesting how traditional music styles have found their place in the digital world. Actually, the internet's kind of been a savior here. Folk artists and traditional musicians can now share their music globally, and you get these amazing online communities keeping those traditions alive. There's this kind of revival energy because people all around the world can discover and fall in love with these traditional sounds. And of course, they're often being blended into modern genres, which helps them survive and evolve in a way. So yeah, it's really cool to see how the old and new come together. Anything else on your mind?
Okay, so my next question from you is Copilot. In what ways do you musicians blend old and new styles today? So why do music styles often repeat or review all the trends? So please give me a very interesting answer and fully long answer on this topic. I'm waiting for your long and interesting answer. So let's start your answer, Copilot.
All right, let's dive in. You know, blending of old and new styles of music is really kind of like a time machine for your ears. Musicians today are basically these sonic alchemists who love to dig into the past for inspiration and then remix those elements of modern sounds. So you'll hear vintage synths or retro melodies popping up in contemporary tracks. And I think the reason it happens is that music is always a cycle. People find comfort in familiar sounds, but there's also that thrill of reinventing them. So it's this constant dance between nostalgia and innovation. Pretty interesting, right? What else can I tell you about?
Okay, so Copilot, my next question from you is how has music been used as a tool for social change throughout history? So please give me a very interesting answer and fully long answer on this topic. I'm waiting for your long and interesting answer. So let's start your answer, Copilot.
Absolutely. Let's jump into that one. Music's been a megaphone for social change for as long as anyone can remember. It just has this incredible power to rally people together, to inspire movements, to give a voice to the unheard. You can think about spirituals and gospel songs during the civil rights era in the US, protest anthems in the 60s, or even the role of hip hop in giving a platform to marginalized voices today. The cool part is you can really feel the impact when a song becomes an anthem for a cause. It kind of transcends entertainment and turns into a form of activism. So music's always had that special spot for shaking things up and making change. Anything else you're curious about?
Okay, so Copilot, my next question from you is what role do musicians play in shaping cultural identity? So please give me a very interesting answer and fully long answer on this topic. I'm waiting for your long and interesting answers. Let's start.
Oh, musicians really are like cultural architects in their own right. They have this unique ability to shape the vibe, style, and even the values of a generation. You know, when you think about the Beatles and the British invasion, or how reggae is synonymous with Jamaican culture, musicians become these figureheads of cultural identity. And what they think about, the fashion they wear, the issues they highlight, it all kind of gets woven into the cultural fabric. So in a way, they help define what different communities and generations stand for. It's pretty fascinating stuff. So what else is on your mind?
Okay, so viewer, this was our Copilot. I hope you like it. I meet with the new Copilot next day, next topic. Thank you and Allah.